Burkina Faso has just delivered a message that shook global markets. Our gold belongs to our people. In a bold and unexpected move, Captain Ibrahim Traoré has announced the nationalization of Burkina Faso's gold industry sector, long dominated by foreign corporations and Western investors. This decision is more than just economics. It's a declaration of independence, a challenge to the old systems that kept Africa's wealth flowing outward, while its people remained in poverty. For some, Traoré is a visionary reclaiming Africa's destiny. For others, he's a risky populist who could destabilize West Africa's fragile economy. But the stakes don't stop at Burkina Faso's borders, with the world watching closely and neighboring nations already inspired. This single move could ignite a chain reaction across the continent. The question is, has Traoré just rewritten the rules of Africa's economic future? For decades, Burkina Faso's economy has been heavily dependent on gold. The country ranks among the top producers in Africa, yet the wealth has rarely reached its citizens. Instead, multinational corporations, mostly from France, Canada, and the United States, have controlled the mines, reaping massive profits while Burkina Faso struggled with poverty, unemployment, and insecurity. Captain Ibrahim Traoré's announcement of full nationalization marks a direct break from this system. His government argues that foreign exploitation has left the nation trapped in a cycle of dependency by reclaiming control. Traoré says Burkina Faso will finally be able to invest its gold revenue in infrastructure, healthcare, and education. The domestic response has been powerful. Crowds in Ouagadougou celebrated in the streets, waving flags and chanting slogans about sovereignty and freedom. Many young Africans see this as proof that leadership can put people above profit. But not everyone is convinced. Critics within the country warn that the state lacks the expertise and technology to manage complex mining operations. Some fear corruption and mismanagement could erode the gains Traoré promises. Meanwhile, the international backlash has already begun. Western media call the move reckless, and economic analysts warn of capital flight and sanctions. France, which once had a strong economic grip on the region, is particularly alarmed, while the United States has expressed serious concerns over investment security. Yet, despite the criticism, Traoré's allies across Africa are quietly watching and perhaps planning. From Mali to Niger, leaders see a model that could reshape West Africa's balance of power. The United Nations chamber was tense when Burkina Faso's representative defended the nationalization policy before the global community. Western diplomats accused Traoré of economic nationalism that could destabilize investment across Africa. Some went further, warning of sanctions and international isolation if foreign corporations were expelled without compensation. But Traoré, calm and resolute, framed the move not as isolation, but as liberation. For too long, he argued, our people have dug the gold, but it was others who wore the crown. His words struck a chord far beyond Burkina Faso's borders. Delegates from Mali and Niger openly applauded. Even in the gallery, observers from civil society groups nodded in agreement. France's response was immediate and fierce. French officials hinted at suspending aid and tightening financial restrictions. The European Union echoed these sentiments, calling for Burkina Faso to honor international contracts. Yet, as Europe voiced threats, Russia and China stepped forward. Moscow offered new trade agreements for gold purchases, while Beijing proposed infrastructure deals in exchange for long-term access to resources. The message was clear. Traoré was not alone. Meanwhile, in African capitals, the atmosphere was electric. Leaders in Mali, Guinea, and even Senegal began floating discussions about reviewing their own mining contracts. Analysts started warning of a domino effect where one country's boldness could inspire an entire region to rethink its economic ties. If that happened, the consequences for Western corporations would be enormous, billions in investments suddenly at risk. Back home, Traoré delivered a fiery speech at a regional summit. Africa will never be free until its wealth is controlled by Africans, he declared, standing before cheering crowds and television cameras. His image a young captain in military fatigues, raising his fist spread across social media, igniting debates from Dakar to Johannesburg. But the risks were equally dramatic. Burkina Faso's economy faced immediate pressure. Some investors pulled out, currency values wavered, and supply chains grew uncertain. The question grew sharper. Could Traoré deliver on his promises, or would the burden of nationalization become too heavy for his fragile state? In that moment, the continent watched with bated breath. For many Africans, it felt like history repeating itself, another leader daring to stand against global powers. But this time, The world was far more interconnected, and the consequences could ripple across the entire global economy. The days following Traore's announcement were marked by both celebration and uncertainty. In Ouagadougou, jubilant crowds filled the streets, waving flags and chanting, "Our gold, our future." For ordinary citizens, nationalization was not just about economics, it was about dignity, sovereignty, and hope for a better tomorrow. Yet behind the optimism, serious challenges loomed. Taking control of a multi-billion-dollar industry overnight was no simple task. Burkina Faso's state-run mining authority suddenly found itself responsible for operations once managed by corporations with decades of expertise, advanced machinery, and global networks. Analysts pointed out that unless the government quickly secured partnerships for technology and skilled labor, production could decline, hurting the very economy Traoré sought to protect. France responded swiftly. Paris announced it would suspend new aid to Burkina Faso and began withdrawing financial support tied to mining projects. European investors followed suit, freezing assets and pulling back from the region. But Traoré's administration was already seeking alternatives. Talks with Russia intensified, with Moscow offering to supply equipment and training for Burkinabe engineers. China, too, stepped in, proposing infrastructure investment in exchange for long-term gold contracts. Across Africa, the ripple effects were undeniable. Leaders in Mali and Niger voiced support for Burkina Faso's decision, framing it as a model of economic sovereignty. The African Union scheduled an emergency meeting to discuss the implications of resource nationalization. Pan-African voices on social media praised Traoré as a hero, comparing him to historical figures like Thomas Sankara and Kwame Nkrumah. But not everyone agreed. Economists warned that such moves could deter foreign investment across the continent. Without external capital, some argued, African economies might struggle to modernize industries or compete globally. Western media outlets painted Traoré as reckless, gambling with his country's fragile stability. Inside Burkina Faso, the government tried to balance public enthusiasm with realistic expectations. Ministers held press conferences to assure citizens that reforms would be gradual, and that gold revenues would be channeled into visible improvement schools, hospitals, and infrastructure projects. Still, skeptics feared corruption could erode the benefits. After all, history across Africa had shown that controlling wealth did not always mean distributing it fairly. In the regional press, a new narrative began to form. Was this the dawn of a Pan-African economic awakening, or the start of a costly confrontation with the global system? For now, Traoré remained unshaken. His speeches continued to emphasize unity and resilience. "We are not alone," he told a rally in the capital. "Africa is watching. Africa is rising." The resolution of this story was far from certain. But one thing was clear: Burkina Faso had crossed a line that could not easily be undone. Captain Ibrahim Traoré's decision to nationalize Burkina Faso's gold has already carved his name into the continent's history books. In a single move, he has challenged decades of dependency, forcing the world to confront a question it long ignored: what happens when Africa decides to keep its wealth? For supporters, this is the beginning of a new era. They see Traoré as a leader who dares to finish what earlier revolutionaries only dreamed of: an Africa that defines its own destiny, free from the grip of foreign corporations. His speeches resonate with a generation of young Africans who are tired of poverty in resource-rich lands. For critics, however, the risks are undeniable. Without the infrastructure, expertise, and capital once provided by foreign investors, Burkina Faso may face setbacks that could strain its fragile economy. Sanctions, capital flight, and internal mismanagement could turn a bold dream into a heavy burden. Yet, even in uncertainty, the symbolism cannot be overlooked. Across West Africa and beyond, conversations are shifting. Leaders are asking new questions about sovereignty. Citizens are imagining a future where Africa is not just a supplier of raw materials, but a master of its own prosperity. Traoré's gamble may succeed, or it may stumble under global pressure. But whether celebrated as a turning point or remembered as a dangerous experiment, his ultimatum to history is clear. Africa's resources will no longer be a gift to the world. They will be the foundation of Africa's future. The world is watching. The continent is waiting. And the question remains: has Ibrahim Traoré just sparked the beginning of Africa's economic revolution?